I don't know about you, but I think if I hear the term enemies to lovers one more time, I'm going to lose it. I think this trope is so overdone. I don't think anyone has ever convincingly done it. And I just, like, let's just stop. Nobody can do it. Frankly, I don't find it interesting. So this is my petition that we stop with the enemies to lovers and we just focus on enemies. I have noticed in the past couple of years that a lot of the books that I've read have completely lacked any sort of chemistry between the hero and the villain. And a lot of that problem is because heroes are very perfect, they lack flaw, they are not very complex, and conversely with villains, usually it's just like a bad guy, right? Like, or a bad thing. And it's not evil with a face. It's not a person with an agenda. Often it's just like discrimination. Okay, discrimination is bad. We are against discrimination. Would you like to tell me why you chose that to be? It just feels like kind of like a lazy shortcut for I don't want to think of a bad thing, but that makes sense within the world or it makes sense with these characters that I have. And so I'm just going to make it something that everybody agrees with is bad. And so it's really boring. I feel like it's very classic of fantasy. Think Wheel of Time, think even Lord of the Rings, where they're just like, is a Dark Lord. He just is a bad guy. Even Voldemort, I would say to some extent, is just kind of like a bad thing. And is not a character who is bad or character who is doing bad things for their own aim. And I find books with sympathetic villains and with villains who actually have character to be way more interesting than a just sort of stock bad thing or bad guy, evil king. Like in ACOTAR, what's that guy's deal? I don't know. Like, and that makes it so boring. It kills the stakes. It kills the vibes. It just is not interesting. It is not interesting. My petition to get us back to enemies is founded on the brilliant work of Shelley Parker Chan. I've talked at length about how much I love She Who Became the Sun. The Radiant Emperor duology is one of the greatest fantasy duologies of all time. Take that to the bank. One of the things that I love so much about it is how beautifully Shelley Parker Chan writes the enemies. In this video, I'm mostly going to cover the first book of the duology, and that's because I read that one the most recently. I think this dynamic does something completely different in the second book, and so it's not necessarily relevant to the argument I'm making that we need better enemies in books. So this will mostly be covering She Who Became a Sun. He Who Drowned the World is a completely different beast, so that will be discussed at a later time. If you are unfamiliar with She Who Became the Sun, I would recommend maybe you read that before you watch this video because I'm not going to be avoiding spoilers. It just is like not how this is going to be able to work. If you want to read this book and you have not, and I highly encourage you to read this book, I recommend stopping the video now and going to read it before you come back and listen to what I have to say. Essentially, the premise of the book, if you are unfamiliar, is about Zhu Chongba, who is a young girl growing up in extreme poverty in a region of China that is experiencing extreme drought. This book is based on Chinese history, but has a lot of fantasy elements in just like it's a retelling, and so obviously Shelley Parker Chan has taken a lot of liberties with actual history, but it is set within a real Chinese historical period. Zhu Chengba is just determined not to die. That's kind of her whole thing. Her whole thing is that she doesn't want to die. And so she takes the fate of her older brother who dies and begins living life as a boy as she joins into a monastery. And then eventually, when that monastery falls, she decides not only is she not interested in dying, but she's interested in being really fucking awesome. Zhu decides to just take over the world. She's like, if these fucking idiots can do it, I can do it, and better, and hotter, and faster. Her counterpart in this story is Ouyang, who is a eunuch. He's not really a prisoner, but he was taken by the Mongol Empire, who is currently ruling over China. His entire family was killed, and he was allowed to live as a eunuch. He becomes the very close servant of one of the princes, the Mongol princes, and they develop a friendship, and Ouyang is lifted to the position of general. Now, what's really interesting about these two, they interact for the first time when the first time they really interact. They meet once prior, but the first time they have a meaningful interaction with each other, Ouyang has come to destroy the monastery where Zhu lives and where Zhu is being primed to take over as the lead abbot. Ouyang was insulted on his first visit to the monastery because he was not allowed to enter the temple because he was mutilated, because he was a eunuch. And when he comes back, he takes that personally and he decides to destroy the whole temple and kill all the monks. Zhu survives, Zhu escapes, and that sort of sets up this like dance that they do around each other for the duration of this novel. I would say about midway through the book, you realize that Zhu and Ouyang want the same thing. They are both fighting for China to be free of the Mongol emperors. Ouyang is doing it subversively by getting close into a royal wing of the Mongols family and getting really close to one of the heirs, assassinating any others that he can get close enough to. And Zhu does this by becoming a rebel leader and leading the army against the Mongols. Every time I read this book, I get so struck by the sensation of realizing that they are doing the same thing and that they are on the same side. Because up to that point, they have been explicitly organized as opposites. They fight a battle against each other, like literal, like they have a literal battle against each other, in which Zhu shows what she's capable of and is able to lift herself up, and Ouyang is embarrassed and kind of loses some credibility with the Mongol leaders. Up to that point, they've been completely set up as mirrors of each other, as opposites of each other, and just complete enemies in the most basic sense of the word. I'm on this side of the war and you're on that side of the war, and we're just going to keep fighting until one of us is dead and the other one has what they want. And so this moment when Ouyang performs this assassination against one of the Mongol leaders, it catches me by surprise every time because Shelley Parker Chan does such a beautiful job of veiling Ouyang's feelings and veiling his desires, making him kind of this really mysterious but also like slightly reprehensible sort of character. And then there's this moment where it completely flips and you're like, oh my god, these two people should be working together because they want the same thing. It's just such a wonderful feeling to have and to be surprised by that at the midpoint of this book. And then you gradually start to realize that they should be working together. They would be unstoppable. They would have everything each of them wanted. But it is impossible for them to work together. I just got chills thinking about it because it's so cool how Shelley Parker Chan is able to do this, to set up these two people who are just vehement enemies, and then just on a turn of a hair, suddenly they are two people that should be working together and that would do amazing things together, but they cannot work together. They are fundamentally opposed to each other in such a way that it is impossible for them to work together. And it's beautiful. It's so tantalizing. The tension that comes out of that moment, the lifting of the stakes, because at that point you're starting to realize that you like both of these people, but they can't both win somehow. A lot of the reason they can't work together, it's not necessarily logistical. Ouyang could technically just leave and go join the rebel army, and they could work together and it would be fine. But because of how Shelley Parker Chan has set these two people up as mirrors, and if you think about like a real mirror, like when I am standing in front of a mirror and I move my left hand, technically the the reflection is moving their right hand. So we're not really doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing, but like diametrically opposed to each other. Really, we're doing the opposite thing. That's how they set up these two characters, and it is just so exquisite to continue to read the story and to have it kind of unraveling, feel this like, oh, if only they would just work together, if only they could just work together, but knowing that like under no sun is that possible. These two people can't stand each other. A lot of that tension, like I said, it's not really external tension, it's internal tension. It's about how these characters view each other and how they view their worlds. Their worldviews are keeping them apart from each other, despite the fact they have the same goal, despite the fact that they come from very similar backgrounds, despite the fact that they really have experienced kind of the same things. The ways that they've chosen to view their life and the way that they've chosen to view themselves is the reason they can't work together. And that is just, it's just genius. And this is not something that I think most modern fantasy does. There is in fantasy a lot of the times a lack of character and a lack of really nuanced takes on character, and thinking about how these people view themselves and how these people think about the world that they're in and think about the things that have happened to them. I think there is very much an impulse in fantasy to make these perfect heroes that are very like Frodo Baggins, right? That are very Samwise Gamgee, that are just guys who mean well and fight until they achieve their goal, and they never really do anything wrong. They struggle and they face hardships, but a lot of those are external, and there's not this like deep reckoning with themselves as people and who they are as a person. There's a lack of kind of the psychology, I think, in a lot of contemporary fantasy. And I know the impulse is obviously that is the tradition, right? That's very Sauron versus Frodo, and that's fine. If that's what you want to read, awesome. I like the psychological aspects of fantasy fiction and the ways that tweaking elements of our world that we see as inevitable or that we see as just the way things are, if we turn that up on its head, how different would we behave and how different would we think about the things? What would be our new struggles? What would be our new goals? And so I like that aspect. And I think additionally in a lot of fantasy, and especially in the kind of the romantasy genre, there is an impulse for fantasy to be self-insert and to be escapism and to be a fantasy of if I had magic or if, you know, I had a dragon, then what kind of badass would I be, right? And that's all well and good. If you have fun reading that, I'm so happy for you. But for me, I really enjoy a lot of character complexity. I see that a lot. I think queer fiction is just doing that a little bit more maybe than fiction that's not queer. I think a lot of that is because so many queer people have had to live in a world that doesn't suit them, and they think about the ways that they interact with the world and the meaning that they make of their lives a little bit more than maybe somebody who's growing up as part of a normative culture, and a normal person in a normal kind of world, if you think that exists. This is all to say that the way that Shelley Parker Chan makes the psychology of these two people the thing that separates them is so fascinating in a book that is so concerned with fate. On the outset, this is a book about fate. What is your path? What are you destined to be? What is your moral or honor obligation to your family or to your culture or to the gods or to whatever? What is your place in the grand scheme of things? You have to see this out. This is what was always going to happen. And then to have these characters who, in a lot of respects, fight that without necessarily, I think Zhu very much is aware of that, but Ouyang is not necessarily thinking that he's going against fate at all. both of those characters are thinking a lot about what things mean to them. And this meaning that they make is the thing that keeps them from being able to work together. What they make things mean is why they are enemies. It has nothing to do with personality. It has nothing to do with fate. It has nothing to do with anything except this is the story I have written about myself, and if I pay too much attention to the story that you've written about yourself, especially because you've had similar experiences to me, especially because we have very similar backgrounds, especially because we kind of view the world in similar ways, I can't look at that because that will bring into question what the meaning that I have made of my life. And that is why they're enemies. I think Zhu approaches this dynamic with a little bit more curiosity. She is more intrigued about Ouyang and why he has made the meaning of his life that he has. Ouyang is not curious at all about Zhu. Ouyang can't get Zhu far enough away from him. And I think that that is such an interesting dynamic to have between characters. You have this protagonist who is, for all intents and purposes, you're a good guy, chasing after the character who is meant to be framed as the bad guy and saying, I don't think this guy's actually bad. I think this guy's got the right idea, but I think he's made this story of himself that maybe is not true. True, I think, is a very relative term in the context of this book. Zhu is very curious about why Ouyang has made things mean what he's made them mean, and she pushes against that a lot and questions sort of his rigid ideology. Well, we don't actually have to make it mean that. What if we made it mean something different? Like I said, Ouyang not interested in that because that calls into question his whole entire identity, and that calls into question his whole entire journey, his goals and his plans, and everything that he's done and everything he's endured gets called into question if he thinks about how much he has shaped what he has become. And that's so interesting. It's just delicious. It's like catnip to me. But like I said, at the end of the day, these two characters are extremely similar. They both have a very formative experience when they're young that teaches them that they are not worth as much as somebody else, or not really worth anything at all. And they both pick a cause to hang their survival on. Neither of them is super interested in surviving for the sake of surviving. They have to make their survival mean something because they have been taught they are worthless. And Zhu's whole thing at the beginning of the novel is about her brother's fate has to be seen out. There has to be somebody has got to make this come true. This divination that a fortune teller has had about this boy's life has to be true. That boy's dead. I'll be the boy. Ouyang very much puts his identity on avenging the deaths of his family members and the dishonor that they faced at the hands of the Mongols. They both put their whole entire lives on that goal, their entire sense of meaning, their entire sense of direction. Everything about them is just pinpointed on this goal. They have to see it through at all costs. They are both very driven. They both see people as tools to get what they want, and they both see their fates as inevitable. They see themselves as just pawns on a track who have to see this thing through. There's very little real personal desire in either of their motivations, at least for Zhu, not until later in the story. But that's part of where these two characters, their stories about themselves and the meanings that they make for their lives begins to diverge, because Zhu feels this increasing desire for her fate, and Ouyang feels an increasing resistance to it. And that's very much their, if you had to boil their characters down into two things, Zhu is going forward and Ouyang is going backwards, and Zhu is embracing and Ouyang is resisting. That's when they meet, those two kind of fires in each of them very much is sparked, and that kind of sets up this rivalry they have, and this the way that they become enemies. The way that the meaning that they make out of it is so different. So Zhu sees this moment as Ouyang witnessing her fate. Ouyang becomes this person who was there at the formative moments of Zhu's life, and through ostensibly complete coincidence and happenstance. And so because he is always there, Zhu makes his place in her story to be a witness, to be somebody that sees everything that she does and really doesn't flinch from it. Ouyang Ouyang sees Zhu as the catalyst of his fate. This is the person who came in and set the whole thing on fire. This was the spark in the firework shed, okay? Again, you're seeing already how differently they view their experiences in their life and the choices they make about how they view things. Zhu chooses to see this as, oh, this person is a sign. Every time I see this person, I know shit's about to get cranked up. This person's going to be a witness to me. Every time I see this person, I'm getting closer and closer to greatness. And so there's a sort of positivity that she associates with his appearance at all of these events. Ouyang is the opposite. If he sees you, he knows shit's about to get bad for him, and that it's cranking up, like I said, cranking up the volume on his fate. But for him, it's a fate that he doesn't necessarily want to go towards. Resistance and Zhu is a faith that she does want to go towards. It's embracing. It's just all of these moments where you get to see that choice that Shelley Parker Chan makes to have these people think in very clear and specific ways about each other and about themselves and about what things mean. It's just brilliant, and it sets up their enemies' paths so beautifully because every time they meet, you see another obstacle of why will never be able to work together. Ouyang will never be able to get over this feeling that Zhu is the cause and the sort of catalyst of his fate starting to take off, and conversely, Zhu sees Ouyang as this witness and this person who is supposed to see everything that she does and to sort of validate that. But at the end of the day, Ouyang is so married to them being enemies that he can never conceptualize of any kind of world where he and Zhu can work together or where Zhu's presence is anything but catastrophic for him. And this continues through their stories and how they connect to other characters in the book. As Zhu begins to sort of add her own sense of desire to her fate, she starts opening herself up to relationships with other people. She lets in Ma, she lets in Zhu Du, she lets in Chang, all of these other kind of side characters who become into her fate and become into her story and become a part of her story and make that story richer and make that story better and make her goals achievable, because logistically one girl can't take over an entire nation and throw off a generations long empire and then reset up the government. But Ju has to let these people in order for her plans to work and for her goals to be achieved. On the other hand, Ouyang starts to close himself off. He starts to close the doors to people around him, even people around him who are working with him. So there are other Chinese spies in the Mongol army that he's working with, and they will occasionally kind of extend a little bit of an olive branch to him, and he always sees it as, the sort of prank before the humiliation, and he closes himself off always to people who could be his allies. And that's another really, intriguing bit of tension, because you're like, oh, he should work with this person because this person and he have the same goal, but he just keeps he keeps putting this wall around himself and closing himself off and making his world smaller and smaller while Zhu is making hers bigger and bigger. And, that just contributes to this sense that, if he's not going to let these people in, Zhu doesn't stand a chance. He's not open for friends. So there's no way for these two people to work together. As a result of these two people's stories beginning to collide and their fates beginning to be intertwined, Zhu begins to see herself as herself. She begins to release this idea of herself as an imposter, as someone playing the part of Zhu Changba, and she feels herself as Zhu and who she is as a person and what her personal desires are, what her personal stake is in this fate. And she starts to relax into her identity. She starts to relax into her fate, and she frankly just starts to enjoy herself a little bit more. And Ouyang is doing the complete opposite. He makes himself way more miserable. He doubles down in his denial. He becomes somebody that he is not. He makes choices that are not in alignment with who he is as a person and what he wants. and he continually is denying himself any sort of opportunity to even figure out what he wants. Like, he's completely closed off to the idea of being anything different than what he is. And a lot of what he is a very interesting character, and he's one of my favorite characters in literature, period, because of like his such beautiful and complex and deeply tragic psychology, where he is very much let other people define who he is. He's almost completely developed by external forces. He almost has no interiority at all, no sense of himself at all, because of this circumstance of him being a eunuch and how he's treated in his culture, but also the sort of burden of having to, being the last person of his family, being unable to carry on the family line because of this mutilation, and of being, the pet to the people who destroyed his family, and all of these really complex feelings that he should have, deeply personal feelings about. You never can quite figure out what he really believes about himself that's not informed by what somebody else thinks about him or how somebody else treats him. Again, I'm only talking about book one. In book two, we see a little bit of a change in him. Not much, but there is a little bit more going on in book two with his character that begins to kind of crack open him as a person. Full transparency, this is a tragedy. So we're not looking for the rainbow at the end of this one, okay, guys? But I think that knowing that made this reread so much more rich for me, because I know how his story ends, and seeing all of these steps that he takes to make that ending come true. It's just, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Towards the end-ish of this book, there is a confrontation between Zhu and Ouyang that's been a long time coming for both of them. It's really the moment where everything changes. In this battle, they do a one-on-one fight, and Ouyang cuts Zhu's arm off. I think it's like kind of like right above the elbow, so kind of like the middle of the arm. She loses her right hand, which is obviously her weapon hand, her dominant hand. But the reason Ouyang does this is because Ouyang, throughout this book, is under the impression that Zhu is a man. Zhu completely masquerades as a man because they would not let a woman be in charge of the army, but also I think Zhu has more complex feelings about her gender than, the culture can necessarily make sense of. If you want a book about gender, this is a book about gender. Regardless, Ouyang sees Zhu as a man, and by cutting off the sword arm, Ouyang believes that he is mutilating Zhu in the same way that he has been mutilated. He is emasculating Zhu in some way, and that because of this emasculation, she has no choice but to become as wretched as he is, to become as thrown down in society as he is, to not only be externally treated in a certain way, but also he believes that Zhu will have to change what she thinks about herself. Again, still thinking Zhu is a man. And for Ouyang, this is this beautiful moment of he has finally emasculated someone in the way that he's been emasculated. And it's sort of this revenge fantasy against the people that harmed him and mutilated him and took his manhood away from him, literally and figuratively. But for Zhu, it's the opposite, right? Like every time Shelley Parker Chan is just putting an opposite in there that is just so beautifully done. The opposite things happened to Zhu, because at this moment, Zhu says, well, I'm not a man, so I don't have to be emasculated. I actually can do whatever the fuck I want, and this means nothing except I'm gonna have a harder time learning to eat with my other hand, like, and so Zhu doesn't see this moment as a sort of decapitation, but as a blossoming. She says, oh, I'm free to do whatever the fuck I want now. The rules do not apply to me. I no longer have to follow fate to the T. I no longer have to deny who I am. I no longer have to deny what I want. Ouyang's emasculation closes him up. Zhu's blows her wide open, and it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to read these characters having these completely opposite realities. And when Zhu eventually does meet back up with Ouyang, Ouyang is like completely baffled and really has to have this moment of grappling with, okay, well, what could have happened if I didn't believe what everybody was telling me about what my castration meant. And he doesn't like that, right? Like, nobody likes this moment of saying, and have I ruined myself for nothing? But it's just so beautiful, and it's so moving, and it's such like a beautiful meditation on what we believe about ourselves becomes our reality. And while obviously there are a lot of external factors that are crippling these characters that are completely valid, right? Like Ouyang cannot have children. So his role in this historical Chinese society, he can't do it anymore. And so there is this sort of shame and this sort of crippling that happens that is real. But what Ouyang makes that mean about him and what his life is worth and what he is worth is the thing, right? Like that is the thing that this book is about. And I just think it's so exquisite. It's so exquisite. They are both put behind. Zhu's born as a girl. Ouyang is mutilated in this way. They are both kind of set outside the bounds of who is supposed to have power and what that power is supposed to look like. And throughout this book, they're just barreling towards each other, kind of on a completely inevitable path. And then right at this moment where they should collide and there should be destruction, Zhu jumps up, Ouyang goes right underneath her, but they're still going in opposite directions. And I think that's what's a really beautiful thing about the sequel. Even when they are put on the same page, they are still going the opposite directions. And that's what makes this story so compelling. And that's what makes their enemies dynamic so interesting. These are people who cannot work together, who fundamentally believe different things about how the world works and how they are allowed to operate in it. They can never see eye to eye. And that is the tragedy and that is the beauty of the story. And that is the kind of enemies dynamic that I want to see more of, right? Like more of that, more of these two people could not be more different. There is no way for them to work together, but you feel this kinship between them. You feel this sort of red thread that is between them and that has tied them together. And derogatory, right? Like it just makes me feel crazy. It makes me feel crazy how beautifully Shelley Parker Chan put this whole thing together. I just want to say thank you, Shelley Parker Chan, for writing this book. I want to say if you've not read this book, I really urge you to read it. One of my favorite moments in this book is towards the end. Zhu has to make a big play and she's put in a very bad situation. There comes a moment where it's kind of do or die, where she has to make a move to solidify her power over this kind of fractured rebel group. The only way to do that, you guessed it, she has to go to Ouyang for help. Oh, it's delicious. It's so delicious when you realize that that's what she has to do. And she has like really no real compunction about this because like I said, she's believing the whole time this person is her witness. This person is a good catalyst for her. Whenever she needs to put her foot on the gas, Ouyang shows up and he becomes the sort of divine signal to her to keep it going, keep it pushing, girl. Opposite for Ouyang, right? Like there is this opposite sensation and this opposite feeling where whenever he sees her, he also thinks he has to put on the gas, but it's to drive into a brick wall. And so when she shows up, he has this like real crisis. And I think another one of the aspects of this book that's so beautiful is the flipping points of view. It's all third person, but you know, you follow more closely one character or the other because their stories are so separate. But to see what Zhu thinks about this person, and especially after they've had this confrontation where Ouyang has amputated her arm, she really kind of harbors no ill feelings about it. She says, well, this is the way it's got to be. This is the way it's got to be. And I'm going to make the best of the situation. But like I said, it's something that she sees as freeing her. And Ouyang expects it to be a thing that completely cuts her wings and stops the rebel confrontations. And for these two people to have this confrontation and it's entirely peaceful and they just kind of It's like the Spider-Man meme where they're just, like, pointing at each other, and they're just, like, staring at each other. It's like 2 cats being introduced for the first time, and they're just kind of staring at each other because they don't know what the hell the other one's gonna do, and it's just a beautiful moment, and after that moment, because of how Zhu perceives herself and perceives the world and perceives her place in it, shit opens up for her. And for Ouyang, he sees that as a time that he has to make a really hard choice and do something that he does not want to do, but that completely progresses the story and is part of what he believes is his fate. And it's just so it's so interesting how cathartic the whole thing is because you get the elation of Zhu's side of things where things just start fucking working out for her. She works hard and she does her shit and it works out for her. And then on the other side you have Ouyang who is dragged kicking and screaming to every part of his story, and you feel the tragedy of what he experiences, and you know how painful his fate is to him. Zhu sees her fate as this wonderful celebratory elation, this sort of vindication of I suffered and this is what it means. Ouyang is just I suffered and that's all it means. And it just is so it's so beautiful, and like I said, it makes it really hard for me to do whatever Sarah J. Maas thinks enemies are. This is basically just a whole video telling you how much I fucking love this book. I love this book so much. I love this series so much. The second book, the first time I read it, I was heartbroken for 5 months. I still have not been able to go back and read it because I'm so scared of being hurt again, but also so excited to be hurt again. How do they do that? How do they do that? Shelley Parker Chan, if you ever see this, bestie, I love these books. Thank you. I'll take 7 more. Okay, that's enough out of me. Please read these books. And that's all. Okay, bye. I've actually been thinking about Ouyang and Zhu a lot because so I've recently moved back to live with my mom and my brother has a cat. And this cat is actually the twin to my cat, Erie, but Ozzy is used to being alone, and he's never met Hal Jenkins before, and Hal Jenkins wants nothing more than to see what the fuck Ozzy is about. Like, Hal does not have a mean bone in his body. He's never met a foe in his life. Everybody's his friends. Everybody loves him. And he wants nothing more than to spend time with Ozzy. And Ozzy's like, this big fuck is the devil. And so every time Hal gets close, Ozzy just screams. And I'm like, this is just like Zhu and Ouyang, you know? I hope they get along. And I hope no one has to die.